So I have a lot of things to ask you, and we're not going to get to them all, but we're going to get to a little bit of them. And I went and reread your book to kind of start to think of some ideas and stuff to ask you. And there's this line in the book that stuck out to me, and I wanted to ask you about it. And the line you say is that most great musicians or artists of any kind are usually modest or insecure or both. And I was wondering where you feel you fall on that.
Well, I'm a big head, so I think I'm exactly that, you know. I know there are lots of different personalities that become musicians, not necessarily what I described there, but I found that all the people that I've met, that always dangerous to meet your heroes, you know. You don't know how that's going to come off, and you don't want to spoil that. How do you think about them? And most of the, I would say 98% of the people that I really wanted to meet have been down to earth and really sensitive people, not necessarily that insecure, but some are, you know. But I find that the people that are all about themselves and generally might not have as much talent as they think they do. But you know, again, that's just my thinking. That's not true all the way.
So obviously you have a long history, but where I want to kind of start is your last couple records when you started doing more instrumental music, because we're a room full of guitar players here. And I want to ask you a little bit about your approach to, because for a large part of your career you've written primarily vocal-based music. Mm-hmm. And so when you approach a song like Black Hole Sun, for example, from a guitaristic standpoint, what are kind of your goals when you learn to state that melody and you're trying to capture kind of the essence of Chris's vocals? You know, what are some things you do as a guitar player with a guitar player's mind that you do to kind of pull the emotion out of that melody?
Well, first of all, I've got to absolutely inhabit the song or love it first, which Black Hole Sun was, when I first heard it on the radio, it gave me, I was one giant goosebump. You know, it was like, oh my God, that's incredible. Writing, chords, melody, everything. And so if it gives me goosebumps, I probably want to try and play it, you know. So, but I think that the main thing is to try and capture the essence of what Chris, for that particular song, Chris was doing, which is his voice was so soulful. And I'm going to mention this phrase more than once probably. His choice of notes, even singing, you know, very important. And the way he structured the song. So I'm basically trying to do that justice. You know, that's a brave move, and even I thought that. But I had, you know, I had Pearl Jam backing me up, so I wasn't worried.
Would you mind playing a little bit of the melody?
Of Black Hole Sun?
Or any melody, would that be okay?
Yeah.
Play a little bit? Okay.
Yeah. Oh my God! Yeah!
Why, have you heard about this guitar?
So,
what have you heard?
I gotta say, that's an incredible recreation, Peter.
Okay, so...
songs you did recently. When you're working on a melody like that, can you maybe walk us through some of the considerations you make in terms of like maybe what register you play it in or how you phrase it? Because I know earlier this week we did a similar class like this with Joe, and he was talking about how sometimes it could take him weeks to find the right way, not necessarily the right notes, but the right way to really phrase a melody. So could you shine some light on that for us?
On, say, the track, the cover of Avalon, Roxy Music one, which I really felt that I used my 59 335 on that, and it's just into a Vox AC 15, just breaking up, not a lot, and it's all about sound for me. Sound is very, very inspiring, and if I don't have a good sound, it's very difficult for me to play, you know. But as far as phrasing, I don't think about it. I don't. It's like I was saying earlier to Zizi, that I know that I'm going to go on the stage tonight, and every night that I go on stage, and I wipe the slate clean. And every solo that I'm going to play, I've never played before. And it's dangerous, and you make mistakes, but in that way, I find that I stretch myself. And then I come off and I say, well, I've got to learn that, do that phrase better. But it's something that I just played for the first time that way.
Yeah.
And it's very inspiring to me to do that.
When did you first learn about improvisation when you were a young guitar player? Because I know I've heard some guitar players talk about they'll learn things and they'll maybe hear a record and they'll think, well, maybe that was all planned, and then it kind of dawns on them that these artists are literally making it up in the moment. When did you kind of come to that realization?
Well, when I was 14 and I joined this band called The Preachers, and it was managed by Bill Wyman and of the Stones, and I was still at school, and the leader of the band, Tony Chapman, came to me, and I was working in a music shop. I was too young, but I was still working in it. And so he came in for his sticks, and and he said, "What do you think about playing with my new band? It's a semi-pro band." And I said, "Well, yeah, I'll give it a go." I said, "But I can't play, you know, Sunday nights. I can't tour Sunday nights. I got a math test on Monday morning, you know." And the bugger knew that I had a date on the Sunday night too. So he was always looking at me because I get everything wrong. And but anyway, so Tony said to me, "Here's like a stack of albums like this. We do everything from Mose Allison to Otis Redding to Rolling Stones to Roland Kirk to, you know, Kenny Burrell with Jimmy Smith." I said, I didn't know any of these people, you know, at that time. And so he just marked all the numbers on the album. So I went home with this, and I said, "When's rehearsal?" "It's like Friday." He said, "Tuesday." So I had to learn all these specific tracks, and then I think Kenny Burrell was the first jazz player that I listened to that just again, it's all about sound. His sound is just so unique, and it's wonderful. I got the goosebumps. And yeah, so and I realized he was making it up on the fly. You know, he wasn't. So then I started listening to more jazz and blues, and then I realized, you know, with the 3 chords, 1, 4, 5 blues, that it could be different every chorus. You know, it doesn't have to be anything the same. So, you okay? Try and keep hold of your phone, would you please? So anyway, I forgot what I'm saying now. Anyway, but
1, 4, 5 blues. When you
yeah, and then I realized that, you know, by the time I was 15, I was going up to the Flamingo Club in Wardour Street and seeing John Mayall's Blues Breakers with Eric and, you know, Mick Taylor and Peter Green and all the different guitar players. And it seemed all in a row. Then before you knew it, I was in a band called The Herd and Jimi Hendrix comes around. So it was like I listened to all these people. But that's when in England, when you would drive around London and on the overpasses, the train overpasses, there would be, you know, graffiti, Clapton is God, you know, everywhere, you know. I pretty much agreed with them, you know. I mean, it was just a seductive style. And I said, the trouble is, everybody's starting to sound like Eric, or what they think is Eric. And I thought, I don't want to do that. So as much as I've nicked from Eric along the way, I made a habit of not just listening to the blues that was developing at that time.
And that was one thing, as I was kind of preparing for this, you know, I'll listen to you and kind of your contemporaries around that time who kind of came out, and your style didn't seem to me to come as much from a blues rock foundation, even though you were listening to that and some jazz and Kenny Burrell, whereas I could really hear it in your other contemporaries. I was curious to where that might have come from, and like you said, that might have been the point where you wanted to go this way while everybody was kind of going that way.
Well, when I joined Humble Pie, it was the best possible thing for me as a guitar player, because I knew that I didn't really have to do a lot of singing, because we had Steve Marriott to do that, even though Steve wanted us all to sing, and we did. But we were doing not Frampton. I combine those with Rock On is like Frampton to me, because they're both the fourth album. And anyway, so we were doing the Rock On album with Glenn Johns, Olympic Studios, and we did a track that I'd brought in the main riff for, Stone Cold Fever. And at the end of Stone Cold Fever, there is an extended guitar solo, and it's, I did it, and we didn't do many takes at all. And then I came in the control room, and when it got to the solo, I didn't say anything to anybody, but I just went, oh wow, that's pretty good now. I said, I think that's my style. And it was like in my face. And that's what it was. So Humble Pie really was the reason. We did so many shows and played so many places that, you know, it was good for the chops, and experimenting with different styles of playing and stuff like that. But I basically, you know, I mean, I listened to Steve's vocals and even copied his vocal lines, you know, myself, you know, as, on the guitar, and you know, and then there's this guy, you know, Miles Davis, who, not a guitarist, but he's one giant goosebump for me. I mean, especially Kind of Blue, which I listened to this morning. It's my Calm Me Down record, you know, that I listen to. And he could play as fast as you know, he could shred on the trumpet. But what I liked about him was the fact that he didn't all the time. And it was, in fact, on Kind of Blue, it's very sparse what he plays, you know, but it gets you deep, because it's this, oh, that note over that chord and that bass line and what Bill Evans is playing on the piano, my goodness. And then he plays it again, the same note, over another chord, another bass note, another, and it's like, oh, did he ever choose the right note there? You know?
Yeah.
So that's what it's about for me.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that it's one of the things I was asking, kind of when you felt like you found your voice as a guitar player, and it must feel so fortunate that you can like really point to a solo on a record and and say, this solo that I did here, that's where everything kind of lined up? Now, you said, did you feel that in the moment, or was it kind of, after it kind of came out, you kind of looked back on it and you're like, no, that's fine?
No, right after I did it.
Right after you did it.
And I didn't remember what I played, because that's, I make it up as I go along sort of thing. So I came in, and that was when it got to the end, and the band was sort of looking at me, like, not bad, And that's when I realized that, not from them looking at me, but just from me personally.
So I've been talking to a couple of the other teachers here in preparation for this, and last night I was talking to Alex Skolnick, and he mentioned, because he had you on his podcast a while back, and he told me that you guys first connected over George Benson. And that was like, for some reason, that just stuck in my head as like, what an interesting influence on you. It makes a little more sense now that you've kind of explained a little of the backstory. But, when you hear Humble Pie, or when you hear that, you might not hear as much of that influence. No. So can you tell me a little bit about George's playing and how it's influenced you, and where maybe you hear that influence pop up in your playing?
Well, I was listening the first time I was listening to George was when he was, I think, 16. And he was with the Jack McDuff trio, and which was, obviously like a Jimmy Smith kind of, but Jack McDuff played great organ. And that was the organ players, Groove Holmes, Jack McDuff, and Jimmy Smith were all huge in England. Jazz was huge in England. Did I say something wrong? And anyway, so I was just listening to him and trying to play along, and learn those licks, the ones that I couldn't slow them. Well, actually, you could slow them down in those days, because 33 1/3 is the album speed, but we had 16 speed on the record players in England. I don't know whether you did here, but we did, and it's.
That's how I listen to your album.
Oh, you do? It's very slow. But I did, and then it was, you could find the notes a little easier and keep putting it back and keep putting it back. But now I use this thing called the Amazing Slow Downer now. So, anybody else? Yeah, I love it. Yeah, because you can gradually bring the speed up to where you can't play it. No,
So, one of the other things I wanted to ask you about was to shift a little bit is kind of the plastic tube in the room here.
Yes.
And obviously we're in a room full of guitar players, and when I was skimming through your book, I never really heard the story of how this was introduced to you. And it seems, as you mentioned in your book, like the actual moment is like on YouTube.
Yes.
Right?
Audio,
right.
Yeah.
Audio. And so it was during the sessions for All Things Must Pass with George Harrison, and forgive me, I'm forgetting
Pete Drake.
Pete Drake, the pedal steel player. So what was like the selling point for you in that moment? Just sheer absurdity because it made this unusual noise, or
no? It goes back. It goes back to a sound that I heard on this radio station that was broadcasting from Luxembourg in Europe, Radio Luxembourg, and it had a call sign that was. They did it with whatever the original thing before the talk box was, that they made that sound, computery sound, and fabulous, and I was just like, oh my God, what is that? And I'm like 9 years old, or 10 years old, whatever. And I always wondered, how did they do that, And so when I heard Stevie Wonder, Music of My Mind, he used what was called the bag. It was made by custom, and slung it over your shoulder rather than on the floor. And he was doing all these background vocals and in other words and stuff like that. He was saying stuff. And I went, oh my God, that's that sound. That's that fabulous 208 sound. So anyway, I still didn't know what it was, but I figured, well, there must be one available somewhere. So anyway, that same year, 1970, I think, was when I did the sessions with George, and he said that we have Pete Drake coming over from Nashville, and he set up his pedal steel the following day, and while they were changing reels one day between tracks, Pete said, "Would you like to hear something?" I said, "Oh yeah." I thought he was just going to play me something nice on the pedal steel, because he's brilliant. He was brilliant, and so he gets out this box, puts it over here. He's got these wires, and he's plugging it here. Then he gets a tube. It's about a quarter of the size of this tube.
Almost like a straw, maybe like a tiny straw.
But sort of rubbery, not plasticky.
Okay.
I think that's before plastics. So anyway, he sticks this tube in his mouth, and he starts singing, "I Am the Guitar." I don't remember the melody, but it's on YouTube, the audio, and you hear George and me laughing because everyone's going, "What the hell is that?" You know?
Right.
And it was a eureka moment for me, because this is something I'd heard when I was 9 years old, and now I'm 20, and I've found it. There it is. And so I said to Pete, "Where did you get this one? Where did you buy this one?" He said, "Oh, I made this myself." I said, "Oh." So, long story short, he lent that talk box to Joe Walsh for Rocky Mountain Way, which I still say to this day is the definitive talk box solo. I love that solo. Then he goes into the slide. It's mesmerizing. And and I've told him that. And so anyway, the only thing, when he recorded it, it was very quiet. It didn't have I don't know how he was amplifying it, Pete was. So he said to Bob Hyatt, who was he makes microphones now, very good ones, and he was our PA company back in the day, and Hyatt Sound. And so they were ham radio buddies, Joe and him. And so he calls up Bob, and he goes, "Bob, I need you to make me one of these talk boxes, but louder." So he says, "Oh, okay, let me see what I can do there." So there it is. There's the talk box, and Bob Howell gave me one for Christmas the following year, and the rest, as they say,
is that the one you used on Frampton's Comes Alive?
Yes. Yeah.
So how, from those early primitive electro days to the version you have here, what are kind of some of the technical improvements that's been made? Obviously, plastics were invented. Not too long ago.
Yes.
How have you kind of perfected the kind of technology behind it since those days?
Yes, I think it's all down to the driver, and I have 3 of these with the last 3 university drivers. They were the high-end drivers in the Clare Brothers PA system.
Oh wow!
And I blew the original driver, because I'm putting 100 watts through it every night, and it's probably like a 20-watt driver in there, the original. And so the PA guy says, "Well, the only thing we've got for tonight is we've got this university driver." So they put it in there, and I said, "That's the best thing since sliced bread. That driver is amazing." So I've used, when we came up with the Frampton, we came up with the box and the concept and everything, which was very similar, obviously, to Bob's, but we put this university driver in there. And it's a phenomenally full set. This can make it sound very clacky and
With a lot of like attack and stuff on it? Yeah.
And so the driver having a lot more body to it gives it a better sound.
So I wanted to ask you about a couple sessions you've done over the years. And one of them, again, I was putting all my feelers out to people to see who might be able to help me find something that you maybe haven't been asked about a lot. And considering the amount of guitar interviews you've probably done, it was
I need a
difficult.
drink.
So I got a hold of Audley Freed, a wonderful guitar player who used to play in your band. And he told me that one day recently he was listening to a Doris Troy record, kind of had it on in the house. And he knew this particular one, I'm forgetting the name of it, but he knew this particular one was produced by George Harrison. And this guitar solo comes on. And he's thinking to himself, catches his ear, he's like, Clapton sounds really good on this. What? He's like, I don't usually hear Clapton play this well, or something, something to that effect. Come to find out, he found out it was you on the record, right? So can you tell us a little bit about the story behind that?
So I was, my girlfriend and myself at the time were friends with someone who worked for George. I didn't really notice that but Terry Doran was his name. And so one night I'm just up in Wardour Street hanging out for the evening, just talking and stuff. And he said, do you want to come and meet George? I said, George who? And he said, Harrison. I said, really? I said, of course I would, but where is he? He's at Trident Studios. And I knew that was a couple of alleyways down on Wardour Street. So we walk down Wardour Street. I go into Trident Studios, and the control room is upstairs, and the studio is downstairs. So I walked in, and so the speakers are here, and the console's over here. So I walked in, and I looked around, and there's George Harrison, my first Beatle meeting. He's sitting behind the console. He jumps up and he comes over and he says, hello, Pete. And I go, Pete Townsend's obviously behind me. But he wasn't. So I said, well, I guess he knows who I am because the Herd and Humble. Anyway, so he comes over and we start talking. Fantastic, talking to, my knees are shaking at this point, and he goes, do you want to play? So I said,
Hold on. Do that imitation again, because that was pretty fun.
you want to play?
Continue.
So I said, now? And he said, yes. So he takes me down into the control room. Now, my whole body's shaking. And so I walk down there, and I'll get into who was in the room in a minute, but he just takes me over to where he had this funny red-looking Les Paul, which we now know is called Lucy, and Princeton reverb, I think. And so he plugs me in and shows me the chords to this song. He said, yeah, we just, Doris, myself, and Stephen have just finished writing this song. I said, Stephen who? And this hand comes up. He's sitting right here. Stephen Stills. So I go, oh my goodness, Stephen, how are you? It's so nice to meet you. Wow. I was like this on George. I was trying to follow every word that he said so I got it right, So anyway, George, I've got the chords, and okay, so we do a run through. George gets his guitar, and he's the Beatles' lead guitar player. I'm playing. I don't want to step on his toes. You know what I mean? So
now you didn't have your own gear. You just showed up.
No,
no.
And it was a very nice Les Paul. And so he goes, no, Pete. I play rhythm, you play lead. So I don't know. I thought the floor was going to open up at that point. So and the it's Ain't That Cute. grit on it than that. But that's what I came up with for the intro, and it kept coming back. And then I did a little bit of a solo. And then George did some slide on it after, overdubbing. And so before I left, George said, do you want to come back and play on the rest of the album? So that's when I ended up playing on 6 or 7 tracks.
And what an underrated slide player is.
Oh, it's fantastic.
I mean,
fantastic.
Just really. I'm still trying to process your spot-on George Harrison impression there. But
why?
But one thing you mentioned earlier was don't meet your heroes type thing. And I would imagine that's not one moment you're obviously happy you did, but it felt so good to not only work with him, but feel some kind of validation that your hero knew who you were and thought so highly of your musicianship that he wanted you to play on his record. And I feel like a bit of that is in events like this, where, a whole lineup of legends like yourself and all these students can interact and learn from them and share that. Was kind of the guitar community around then? Did you ever ask George about guitar things, or did he ever show you some guitar specific things, or did you ever ask him, hey, how'd you play that on this record or anything?
Well, I had in New York. Humble Pie were touring America, and we were based in New York, so we'd come back. I was mixing Humble Pie's live album during the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Then off I'd go, fly somewhere and play with Humble Pie. Come back Sunday night and do the same thing. And I was in New York, and Patty Harrison at the time, George's wife, and George called me up and said, do you want to come over to the hotel? We'll go out for a meal. And I said, yeah, I'd love to. And then he invited me back to their suite, after we had a lovely meal. And in the corner is a record player and every Beatles album in vinyl known to man. And I just thought, I got questions. So I said, I don't know whether this is okay to ask, but can I ask you some questions about, some of these tracks? So I would put on, Paperback Writer and stuff like that, and I would say, wow, what guitar did you use on that? He said, that's not me, that's Paul. But it's okay. But then he said, come on, and he had like 2 champ amps in this bay window suite at the Pierre Hotel. And I said, you want to play through some songs? I said, yeah. So we start playing Beatles songs and George Harrison songs, and I'm going, wow, this is great, but why are we doing this? It's wonderful, and I'm loving it. And he said, well, I said, because they were there to rehearse for the Bangladesh concert and in New York. And so I said, do you need an extra guitar player? And he said, well, no, we're pretty up to date with guitar players, so I've got too many. So I said, oh, okay. And he said, but let us know where you are. I said, well, you can get me through the office, Bandana Enterprises. He said, okay, fine. No cell phones, obviously then. And so I go off somewhere in America to work, and I'm coming back to see the concert,
Yeah.
Well, when I get back, I go backstage, and I tripped and fell into Bob Dylan, which was like one of those, one of those looks. Sorry. And then Terry Dorr, who introduced me to George, says, "Where have you been?" So I said, "Well, I told you I'm on tour. We've been looking for you." I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, Eric was in really bad shape." So I said, "Oh my God, you mean I could have played at the concert? You didn't find me?" No. So basically, they had to. Eric had chosen that time to rid himself of what he was putting in his body, and you can't do that right before a concert. So they had to make him feel good again. And if you notice in the video of that, he's basically leaning against his amp the whole night. He doesn't look good at all. And I didn't quite understand. I knew nothing about this. So anyway, it would have been so easy now to, let me just send you my page, my info page to your iPhone, but can't do that back then.
So I learned this morning that today's a bit of an anniversary.
Yeah.
So 47 years ago today was when Frampton Comes Alive was released.
Yeah.
Woo!
It's been a long time coming. I think, anyway. They say I was good back then.
So, yeah, I mean, and I know you've been asked a million times about that record, but it was so important, I think, to obviously your career, but just guitar music in general, that when you finished those set of concerts, did you feel like it was really something special when you got off stage, or did it take a little bit with some perspective to understand how great those performances were?
We recorded the two shows at Marin Civic Center in Marin County. Then we had a day off, and then we recorded one show at Winterland. And we went after the show at Winterland. That it was one of those nights when usually, mostly you come off stage and every three of you all have, it was great. And one person goes, I played like shit, But this night, we all came off stage going, wow, we were really together, tight and everything. And so we went in and listened in the truck. It literally knocked us against the back wall of the truck. He played it really loud, but the energy level. It was the very, very first time I'd ever headlined in San Francisco, and the Frampton record had virtually owned the airwaves in San Francisco as soon as it came out in '75. So San Francisco, Detroit, New York were the main markets where I were ahead of everywhere else. But it figured that the San Francisco dates would be the best ones to record. Get the truck up from Los Angeles, Wally Hyder's truck. And but then we had to play the Forum supporting Rod, I think, and the following week. And so we came down to Los Angeles and went to Wally Hyder's truck, and the engineer whose name escapes me, Thomas, we'll call him Mr. Thomas. He said, look, I'm just going to put all the faders at 0. I'm not going to mix this. I'm just going to put it flat. And I remember myself, Bob Mayo, and Stanley Sheldon were, again, we were leaning against the back wall in the control room, and it just blew. We realized we had something special then, you know, that it was the energy of the audience that made the show, made us better.
You can feel the audience on the track.
I feed off the audience all the time, you know, always have. You know, it's very hard to play in a room where people are not paying attention, and, you know, that's not for me, you know. So it's...
I assure you, everybody here is
Oh, no. Thank you. Yeah, it was very evident that we had something special, and that's when Chris Kimsey. I remember. Yeah, so we mixed a single album because management said, "Don't do a double one because you haven't made A&M any money yet." So a double album would probably be pushing the limit, you know. They're already, you know, up to here with the amount they paid, so for recordings and stuff. So we mixed one album. There were 5 tracks on it. That's all there were. There was Lines on My Face and Do You Feel, as per side 4 ended up. But the first side was Something's Happening and 2 others, because they're all long, you know. And so Jerry Moss of A&M, the M, who is a wonderful person and a dear friend, and the way he ran a record label was for the musicians. And that's because Herb Albert was his partner, I think. You know, they both loved musicians and music. So Jerry was sitting in front on the couch below the console, and as side 2 finished of the one album, his head just came up over this big grin, and he goes, "Where's the rest? Where's Wind of Change? Where's Penny for Your Thoughts? Where's, you know, all these?" So I said, "Do you want a double album?" And he said, "Yes." I told manager, "I told you wanted it." And then, so we went, then Chris Kimsey came over, my co-producer and engineer for many years, and we did 6 more shows, 2 of which were University of New York, Plattsburgh, which was where we gleaned Baby I Love You Away from, and also in Long Island,
Meadowlands?
Yeah, sorry? No, it wasn't Nassau, no. But yes, Comac, thank you. So, I'm old. Comac, Long Island, was the most disgusting sound in the world. But Eddie Kramer actually recorded that one, and with the Fedco truck. I'm remembering this stuff, but I just don't remember other stuff. So he recorded the whole night, but we got Show Me the Way from that night.
So you're obviously a great guitar player, but you're also a great songwriter. Were there times in your career where you felt your identity? Were there times in your career where you felt more your identity was based around being a guitar player or a songwriter at certain times of your career?
No. I've always thought of being a guitar player first. I have an okay voice. I enjoy singing, but it's not my forte. It's okay. I do the best job with what I got. And but guitar playing is something where I think I actually sing better with the guitar than I do with my voice sometimes. And so yeah, no, that was yeah.
I know I'm not going to get to everything I want to talk to you about, but one point in your career that I really wanted to dive into a bit was the Glass Animals tour you did with Bowie.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because on that tour, you were a band member. You were obviously a high-profile band member, but a band member nonetheless. What was the experience for you like learning the parts you needed to learn from these other guitar players to do the gig? Can you walk us through kind of what your experiences were?
Yes. Well, whether if somebody in here doesn't know, David and I went to school together, so I've known him all my life. And so when he asked me to play on his album, Never Let Me Down, that was one thing. But while we were in Switzerland, he then asked me would I join him on the road. And so I said, let me think about that. Yes. And then he gave me the list of what to learn and everything. And yes, it was very interesting listening to everybody on all the tracks. Fripp, Adrian Ballou, Stevie Ray Vaughan, But I told David, I'm not Stevie Ray Vaughan, and I'm not going to be able to do Stevie Ray Vaughan, but I'll play me. And he said, that's what I want you to do. So that was a breath of fresh, it was a relief that I don't have to be. Heroes is just the one note, So that's it. And of course, I had not heard about. This is ridiculous. I had not heard about EBOs at that point. So I was so fucking loud to feed back on that. And everybody's on the stage going, But no, I managed to do it, and it sounded like the record, but it wasn't. Now with an EBO, you can do it really quietly. So
I'm gonna jump around a bit because I want to at least hit on a couple things. And again, talking about meeting your heroes and playing with your heroes. You had the chance to record a tune with Hank Marvin in the Shadows.
Yes.
Who I know is probably one of your all-time, if not your all-time, guitar hero.
Yes.
And again, I feel like many people here likely might have had a similar experience. And in reading your book, what really struck me was that as all these incredible experiences were happening, playing with George Harrison, playing with Hank Marvin, even in your book, you made a point to say, I had to stop for a second and take it in and realize that this is not normal, but I'm very lucky to have these experiences. So can you kind of put us in the room with you there when you're playing with Hank Marvin in the Shadows, and are you having flashbacks to when you're 8, 9 years old and you're hearing them on radio? I'm sure, yeah.
Well, we had met on various TV shows, over the years when I was in the Herd, because he'd be on Top of the Pops with Cliff, and so it was just hi, how you doing kind of thing, and then I don't know how we actually. Oh, I know what it was. We were playing London, Shepherd's Bush, and. We had, for the beginning of the show, we had a Shadow song, recorded. And at the end, we had Nivram playing as people were walking out. And as I didn't know everybody else knew he was coming, but I didn't know Hank was coming.
They probably didn't tell you on purpose.
No. And so as he was, after the show, as he was walking up to the backstage apparently, he paused as we were playing Nivram over the PA, and he went, I'm sure that's me, so he came back, my parents were there, my brother was there, and they witnessed me talking and having a beer with Hank Marvin, and my mother was all over him too. Do you know what you mean to my son?
Thanks, Mom.
Dad, get her out of here. Dad. And but anyway, so that was when we really bonded and stayed in touch, email and phone and stuff. He's in Perth. So anyway, I called him up when I was doing the Fingerprints instrumental album, and each track was like a whole album in arranging it to get to wherever I had to go to do it. And so I called up Hank and I said, would you write an instrumental with me? And he said, absolutely. So I said, oh my God, yes, great. So they were doing one of their final tours of England, and he said, we should do it in England the day after I finish the tour, because I won't go back to Perth, Australia, and if you can find a studio, we'll go in. So Mark Knopfler lent me his British Grove studio, which was very nice.
What a nice
of
guy.
him. Yes, and a couple amps too. So we went in there, and not only was it Hank, but he brought Brian Bennett, the drummer, and the bass player as well. Unfortunately, Bruce Welsh had a family holiday. He'd gone already. So I took the place. So there was basically, I had the Shadows in the room, you know.
Yeah.
So that was probably about 18 hours from beginning to end, writing it and recording it. And then at one moment, we're both he's doing a verse, I'm doing a verse, he's doing a bridge, and I said, can you do this part here? So later on he said, what part did you want me to play on? I said, well, this little bridge that goes into the last thing there. He said, well, what should I play there? And I did a fake, you know, I'm like flagging myself. I can't tell Hank Marvin what to play. There's no way in hell I'm going to tell you what to play. Just play Hank, you know, and he did, and it was beautiful.
Did you play a Wonderful Land?
Oh gosh, yes.
Right.
His tech had asked me before we'd started the session, what's your favorite Shadows song? I said, it's Wonderful Land. And so anyway, we finished the session, and Brian goes back out in the studio. I thought he was packing his drums up, but he gets behind the drums. Bass player Mark goes out and picks up his bass. Hank puts on his guitar, and I said, what's going on? He said, well, we're recording a number now ourselves. I said, I didn't get this memo, you know. So, and then he goes, you know.
I was thinking, can you play a little bit? Wiggle stick.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, so, and then I'm like this. They're playing this, and we're filming it too. And then he goes, where's my rhythm player? So I had to go get my acoustic, which was open-tuned at the time. I had to retune it while they're playing. And then I was so flustered, I got all the chords wrong. And Hank looks at me like, what? So, but it was the most incredible day, one of my life. Well, each track that we did for Fingerprints was like a whole new ball game for me.
So, you had the recent Royal Albert Hall shows wrapped up, which I'm sure were just incredible experiences for you to return and do that. So,
there's a gentleman here who came all the way from there. There he is. Oh, you did too?
I was there too.
You were there too?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay,
How was it?
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was so bad, we'd come back to see if he can do any better.
Well, so one of the other things Audley told me, he remembers you practicing all the time. And you mentioned the amazing slow downer, which tells me that you're still at it, which is so inspiring, Peter. It really, really is.
Well, I've got to eat. The downside to what this silly disease I have is that it affects my quads, these down here in the front, not the sides. It picks and chooses, but it also affects my arms and my hands. So, you know, this it's difficult. That's otherwise it would, you know, to come off. So I've had to kind of rethink a little bit, but I've so enjoyed it because I think what I've learned is that even if I'm not playing all the things I used to play, each note has got much more soul in it because each note is so much more important to me now, you know, and I've never been a shredder, but and you guys scare me to death. But I've always, I can play a fast lick whenever I want to, you know, but not so much now, you know. And instead of being depressed about it, I got this amazing slow down around, and I learned something from George Benson. You know, I learned something from, I slow a Django down, and I'll just take like 8 bars of a Django solo, slow it down, and see what I can, if I could get it going.
What's a recent musical discovery you've had?
Except it should be like 700% faster. but yeah, so I'm still learning that one. But it's, yeah, I don't know, you don't know what you have until you go there,
Yeah.
you know. So it's, I push myself, you know. I fight every day just to keep it going, you know, because I love playing music. I love to play guitar, and I love to be on the road, but that's a little less available to me now. But I wish I could go on forever, but I know, unfortunately, there will be a point where I won't be able to play. So I'm just getting my rocks off now.
So you have a studio at home, so you're able to still record a little bit?
Yeah, I have a music room at home, which is obviously I do a lot of recording there, but I do own a studio, full studio in Nashville. I'm very lucky. And when everybody started recording on laptops, all the studios started selling themselves because, you know, there were too many, because people don't use proper studios as much as they did before, you know. And so I managed to buy a studio at a more reasonable price. And it's called Studio Phoenix. And it's in Nashville and in Berry Hill. And yes, it's the mandolin player that plays with Corey.
Chris Steele.
Yes.
Yes. Or Sierra Hall.
Sierra.
Sierra, okay. Yeah.
She's in my studio today.
Is she really?
In Nashville, yeah.
Oh, wow.
So,
Talk about a shred.
oh my God,
She's
yes.
incredible.
That's why I left town.
Well, just to kind of wrap up here, Peter, I'm sure I speak for everybody here that we can't thank you enough for sharing your story and your music and for being here today.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so
And
much.
thank you.